Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I'm going to tell you about an HOA that says that my gazebos are shared property. I should have realized something was off the first time my phone pinged at dawn with a message that simply read, "Your gazebos are community assets now." Nothing good ever arrives wrapped in vagueness at 5:17 a.m. But back then I still believed in neighbors helping neighbors, in homeowner associations behaving like the volunteer garden clubs they claim to be, and in the power of my coffee maker to fix anything. Spoiler, fresh ground beans can't cure arrogance. A quick sketch of my situation so you understand why I was half asleep in a log chair watching sunrise spill over mountain ridges. 2 years earlier, I'd cashed out of the city, bought a 10-acre triangle of rocky hillside, and spent every spare weekend turning it from, yep, that's a slope, into a kind of micro-park. I carved a switchback trail, planted native wildflowers, and, my proudest achievement, set 3 hexagonal cedar gazebos at different elevations. The lowest sat under ponderosa pines for shade on hot afternoons. The middle hovered at the edge of a granite outcrop with a view west towards sunset. The top one, perched just shy of the ridgeline, felt like a lighthouse without an ocean. Picture-clear cedar, thick stainless steel cable rail, solar-powered lanterns, and Adirondack chairs. I milled myself. I called them the trifecta. Everything was permitted, inspected, and signed off by the county. I even recorded a site plan with the assessor so future buyers wouldn't wonder what the odd little rooftops were. I'd paid cash, no liens. Legally and morally, the trifecta belonged to me the way a diary belongs to its author. Enter the Silver Pines Ridge Owners Association. Population: 57 lots, and a board that considered itself a tiny senate. Our covenants were blessedly light. Keep your weeds down. Don't run a junkyard. No loud parties after 10. Nothing about gazebos, nothing about amenities unless built with association funds and approved by a 2/3 vote. Simple, on paper. That dawn text was from Gideon, current HOA president and a man who looked like an insurance commercial for bland confidence. 10 minutes later, he followed up with, "Kindly drop 3 sets of keys to the structures in the HOA office box by Friday. We'll add them to the common area map." Then a winking emoji, as if demanding property was flirty. I rubbed my temples, took a screenshot, and replied, "Morning. The gazebos are on my private parcel, recorded deed. No keys exist because no locks exist. Please clarify." He shot back a PDF, an emergency interim policy the board had passed at last night's meeting, apparently a quorum of 3, declaring that all elevated or recreational structures visible from community roads shall be deemed shared property to ensure equal access to views. 3 lines, no legal citations. Signed by Gideon, Marla, Secretary, and Dex, Treasurer, the triumvirate of entitlement. I laughed so hard I nearly tipped my mug. Equal access to views? By that logic, everyone in a city gets to walk into any penthouse because the skyline belongs to humanity. Still, I believe in paperwork. So I pulled the covenants, highlighted the sections that torpedoed their power grab, and emailed a polite rebuttal. I copied Ember, my next-door neighbor, friend, and quietly brilliant land use attorney, just in case. The rest of that week turned into a sitcom montage. Monday evening, a pickup idled at my gate while someone leaned out and snapped photos. Tuesday, Marla sent me a hand-delivered letter stating I owed reasonable accommodation to residents with mobility issues, so the board would install an ADA ramp and kindly bill you later. Wednesday, I discovered orange survey tape tied to my rhododendrons, marking, apparently, the board's proposed footpath. Thursday night, Ember and I sat on the middle gazebo sipping iced tea, both furious in different keys. She scrolled through the covenants on her tablet, muttering legal Latin like a wizard casting counterspells. "They're banking on you rolling over," she said. "If you fight, they fold." Classic overreach. I wanted to believe her, but Friday proved optimism has limits. I woke to the metallic bark of bolt cutters. Through the pines, I spotted 3 silhouettes on the trail: Gideon, Dex, and a guy I didn't recognize lugging a toolbox. They'd cut my chain and were trudging uphill, apparently to inspect their new park. Old me might have shouted. New me reached for my phone, opened the sheriff's non-emergency number, small county, deputies answer quick, and hit record on the security cameras I'd installed after a bear trashed my trash shed. 30 minutes later, a cruiser crawled up my driveway, lights off but authority unmistakable. Deputy Torres, a calm presence with patient eyes, stepped out and listened while I replayed the live stream of Gideon's crew unscrewing a gazebo hinge to check craftsmanship. Torres nodded, radioed his location, and hiked the trail with me. Halfway up, we met the trespassers headed down, sweaty and triumphant, until they saw a badge. Gideon tried the smile he probably practiced in mirrors. "Officer, everything's fine. Association business." "Sir," Torres said, "did the owner invite you?" Gideon gestured at the horizon as if the whole landscape were his PowerPoint slide. "These structures are designated common facilities," Torres interrupted. "They're on his parcel. He did not give consent. That's criminal trespass. I'll need ID." Dex squeaked. Toolbox guy sprinted downhill. Apparently he wasn't keen on paperwork. Gideon's smile calcified. "You can't be serious. We govern this neighborhood, and I enforce the law," Torres replied. The ride to the county station wasn't long, but word traveled faster than the cruiser. By afternoon, social media groups buzzed. Gazebo Gate trended locally. Some neighbors cheered the board for sticking up for the little guy. Others asked how seizing private property helped anyone. My favorite comment came from a retired math teacher. "When did HOA become Hot-Headed Opportunists Alliance?" That night, Ember brought lasagna and a battle plan. "We can go scorched earth," she said, "but there's a sweeter way. Malicious compliance." I raised an eyebrow. "They want keys, let's give them keys," she explained. Literal compliance, figurative slap. We spent Saturday brainstorming. By sunset, we had a strategy equal parts lawful, petty, and ironclad. Step 1. Install locks. Expensive, high-security deadbolts. All keyed alike, but impossibly inconvenient. Step 2. Create exactly 3 keys, each welded into the middle of a 50-pound steel dumbbell. Step 3. Document everything, deliver per their demand, and enjoy the unfolding chaos. They wanted access, they'd better lift. Before executing Operation Hefty Key, I double-checked the covenants again, consulted a real estate litigator Ember trusted, and filed a formal cease and desist against the board concerning further trespass. I also posted laminated notices at every trail entrance. Private property authorized visitors only. Locks added per HOA request. In smaller print, access keys available from HOA board, 50 pounds each. Bring assistance. By the time Monday rolled around, Gideon had posted bail and resumed email barrages. He threatened daily fines of $500 for restricting common features, demanded removal of my new locks, and scheduled an emergency hearing. His confidence suggested he'd never read an actual statute. Tuesday morning, during my coffee ritual, I spotted Marla's sedan easing up my drive. She stepped out, stilettos sinking into gravel, and eyed the dumbbell key I'd left on a folding dolly per our agreement. "What is that?" I shrugged. "The key you ordered. Feel free to copy it, but I'm keeping the original as mandated." She tried to lift it, didn't budge. Her face flushed the shade of a traffic cone. "This is harassment." "No, ma'am, this is compliance. You wanted 3 keys. The other 2 are with Deputy Torres at the sheriff's desk. Chain of custody. Keeps everyone honest." Marla sputtered something about reasonable weight and retreated to her car, crunching gears in a hasty 3-point turn. That afternoon, a certified letter from the board accused me of willful sabotage, demanded a membership vote to expropriate the gazebos, and set a date for a special meeting. They also enclosed an invoice for $1,875 labeled Recreational Accessibility Assessment. Cute. What they didn't know was that Ember had spent the past week quietly canvassing neighbors. Turns out Gideon's rule by intimidation hadn't won hearts. Residents were tired of fines for lawn height, of letters dictating curtain colors, of surprise assessment studies. When Ember explained that the board tried to seize my gazebos on a made-up policy, most folks reacted like they'd found a slug in their cereal. The special meeting promised fireworks. I prepared by assembling a binder, county permits, survey maps, video of the trespass, copies of the board's interim policy, and legal opinions from 2 attorneys stating the policy was unenforceable. Meanwhile, Gideon prepared by hiring a slick parliamentarian to run the meeting and printing glossy flyers with bullet points like Fair Vista Access for All. The gathering took place in the community lodge. Knotty pine walls, folding chairs, cookies nobody touched. About 40 homeowners showed up. Impressive for a Tuesday. Gideon opened with a speech about equity of sightlines and communal spirit. He painted my gazebos as a symbol of elitism, blocking shared joy. I waited until he finished, then raised my hand. The parliamentarian, smelling drama, recognized me. I offered calm facts. My deed, the permitting record, the covenant section citing private structures. the board's lack of authority to declare them common. I placed the steel dumbbell key on the table with a thud that echoed like a gavel. Murmurs spread. When Gideon tried to rebut, people peppered him with questions unrelated to gazebos. Why did landscaping costs triple last quarter? Why were dues increased without a vote? Why did the association suddenly need a Vista committee whose only members were him and his cousin? He deflected, but the room tilted. Ember, wearing her lawyer face, motioned to recall the board under Bylaw Section 407. Someone seconded. The parliamentarian, to his credit, knew the rules. With enough signatures, a majority of those present, the recall vote was valid tonight. The tension was thick enough to spread on toast. Gideon whispered with Marla and Dex. They called a recess. During that pause, I stepped outside to breathe mountain air tasting of pine and possibility. Half the membership followed, asking to see the gazebos sometime. I said sure once the legal fog lifted. 10 minutes later, the board filed back in, looking rattled. Gideon announced they were withdrawing the interim policy pending further review, a tactical retreat, but too late. The recall vote proceeded. Ballots were counted by neutral volunteers. Result 31 for, 8 against, 1 abstain. Effective immediately, the board was dissolved. A temporary committee led by Ember would oversee until fresh elections. Gideon's face went pale. Marla glared at me like I'd keyed her car. Dex just looked relieved, but if they thought the saga ended, they underestimated the legal aftershocks. The sheriff's office still had my trespass complaint. County prosecutors decided to pursue misdemeanor charges against Gideon and Dex, given the video evidence and the board's admitted overreach. Toolbox Guy turned out to be a handyman unpaid for past work, who gladly testified to avoid charges himself. I drove home from the meeting under a sky peppered with stars brighter than city headlights, feeling equal parts exhausted and triumphant. The trifecta glowed along the ridge, silent witnesses to a small victory. Yet I sensed the echo of Gideon's arrogance lurking, plotting riposts. Entitlement rarely accepts defeat on the first round. Sure enough, 2 days later I received certified mail from a law firm, Hawksley and Drum, announcing representation of the former board members and threatening civil action for intentional infliction of emotional distress via extreme key weight. I nearly choked laughing. Apparently heft aggravates delicate egos. I called Ember. She laughed too, then sobered. This is harassment by lawsuit. We'll counterclaim. And I think it's time we examine the association's finances. Something smells. That set the stage for the next chapter. Forensic accounting, surprise audits, and consequences that reached far beyond my hillside. If the board's attempted land grab felt like a sitcom, the aftermath played more like a courtroom thriller filmed on a shoestring budget. Ember's interim committee, 5 homeowners who actually read bylaws for fun, started by opening the sealed metal cabinet in the lodge office. Inside, they found 12 years of receipts crammed into mismatched folders labeled things like general stuff and important don't trash. The treasurer, Dex, had apparently considered Excel a dark art, so every transaction was handwritten, often in purple ink, sometimes on cocktail napkins. We hired a certified public accountant named Tessa who treated sloppy books the way an archaeologist treats cuneiform tablets, with reverence and relentless curiosity. She set up a folding table in the lodge, spread everything out, and began logging each line item into a database. 3 hours in, she called Ember and me over. "Tell me if I'm reading this right," she said, tapping her laptop. The association paid $7,960 last April for Vista Enhancement Consulting, but the check was written to a Gideon, with the same P.O. box as your former president. That was only appetizer. Over the next week, Tessa unearthed a buffet of improprieties. $14,000 to a landscaping outfit that existed for 3 months. Owner, Gideon's cousin Jax. $4,200 in refreshments for meetings that produced nothing but coffee and stale cookies. A mysterious $9,300 equipment rental that matched payments on Gideon's personal ATV. Dex, confronted, admitted he'd signed whatever invoices Gideon handed him. He said they were standard, Dex stammered, cheeks the color of raw salmon. Ember didn't waste time. She drafted a report, attached every scanned receipt, and delivered it to the homeowners and to the county's Office of Consumer Protection. She also gave a copy to Deputy Torres, who forwarded it to the district attorney's Financial Crimes Unit. Nothing says wake up like potential felony fraud. Meanwhile, Hawksley and Drum, Gideon's hired guns, filed their promised civil suit against me. deliberate emotional cruelty via excessive key weight, plus property blockade from the deadbolts. Their complaint ran 21 pages, half of which described Gideon's wrist strain and feelings of public humiliation. My attorney, a bulldog named Carlin, responded with a motion to dismiss and a countersuit for trespass, vandalism, and abuse of process. We also attached the audit findings to demonstrate a pattern of misconduct. At the first hearing, the judge, grizzled and dry-humored, lifted Gideon's dumbbell key with 2 hands, set it on his bench, and asked, "Counsel, are you claiming this object broke your client's spirit?" Hawksley cleared his throat. Spectators snickered. 10 minutes later, the emotional distress claim was tossed with prejudice, meaning it could never rise from the grave. The judge reserved ruling on my countersuit until criminal matters shook out. But he did award me legal fees for the frivolous filing. Gideon's jaw flexed like he was chewing gravel. All that legal sparring didn't pay bills, however, and the association's bank balance, drained by Gideon's antics, hovered near zero. Dues had been jacked up twice the past year, but most residents hadn't noticed because autopay masks a lot of sins. Ember proposed a temporary freeze and voluntary workdays instead of hiring contractors. People showed up with rakes, chainsaws, and slow cookers of chili. Kids painted birdhouses to hang along the nature trail. For the first time since I'd moved in, the neighborhood felt like a community rather than a row of checkbooks. Gideon did not attend the workdays. Instead, he mailed glossy leaflets to every mailbox, decrying the unlawful coup and warning that property values will plummet under amateur leadership. The flyers featured a stock photo of a foreclosure sign superimposed on a sad family. Most folks laughed it off, though one elderly couple asked if we were really foreclosing on them. Ember visited, explained the facts, and left them with homemade peach jam, crisis averted. While Tessa pored over receipts, I turned my petty streak into a business lesson. The dumbbell key had gone viral after a neighbor posted a photo on social media. When your HOA demands reasonable access. Within days, woodworkers and gym rats alike were asking where to buy replicas. So I fired up my small workshop, cast miniature versions in aluminum, 5 pounds each, manageable but still ridiculous, and sold them online as paperweights. I called them the Gatekeeper series. Proceeds paid my attorney retainer, and I donated the surplus to a local trail maintenance fund. Gideon's symbol of entitlement became a fundraiser for public hiking paths. Irony tastes best when served cold and profitable. Winter arrived early. A storm blew through with sideways sleet and 90-mile-an-hour gusts. The middle gazebo lost a few shingles but held fast. The top one swayed like a ship's mast yet remained intact. On the second night of the storm, a fir tree snapped and crushed the roof of the community lodge, the very room where we'd voted Gideon out. Power lines went down, leaving the subdivision dark except for flickering fireplaces and my solar lanterns up the hill. People began trudging the trail to my gazebos, drawn by the steady glow. I set out thermoses of cocoa and opened a stack of fleece blankets. For 3 nights, the trifecta served as an impromptu warming center. No one questioned whose property it was. They were too busy swapping storm stories and playing cards by lantern light. When the power company finally restored service, Ember convened an emergency meeting on my lowest gazebo. Attendance was huge. Folks brought folding chairs and headlamps. Tessa presented her findings in plain language. $62,487 unaccounted for over 3 fiscal years, plus $18,200 in duplicate reimbursements. Audience reaction oscillated between gasps and muttered curses. Then Tessa dropped the real bombshell, a paper trail showing Gideon had signed a personal guarantee with a finance company, using future special assessments as collateral for a brand new pickup truck, registered solely in his name. The next morning, sheriff's detectives arrested Gideon at his house on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. They also picked up Marla for co-signing false invoices. Dex, who'd already turned over every scrap of communication, got immunity in exchange for testimony, though he faced civil liability. The evening news carried footage of Gideon being let out in handcuffs, winter coat rumpled, dignity in tatters. He avoided eye contact with the camera but couldn't dodge the headline, HOA president accused of stealing from neighbors. One might think that would end the saga, yet lawsuits, like hydras, sprout fresh heads. Gideon hired new counsel, less fancy, more desperate, and sued the association itself for wrongful removal, claiming the recall violated procedural fairness. His lawyer argued that emergency bylaws required 10 days' notice, not the 7 we gave. Ember countered with Section 10.3, which allows accelerated action when financial mismanagement threatens solvency. The judge scheduled oral argument for March. March felt light years away, so life slipped back into a rhythm. We rebuilt the lodge roof as a community barn raising, using volunteer labor and donated lumber. Someone suggested adding a rooftop deck, purely private, no keys required. But we settled for skylights and a pellet stove. During breaks, we debated new bylaws, term limits, mandatory audits, a sunshine clause for meeting minutes. Everyone agreed transparency tasted sweeter than Gideon's secret cookies. In December, a new plotline entered stage left. A developer named Camden Woods LLC filed a petition with the county to rezone 5 forested acres just outside our boundary into high-density chalet cabins, basically mini Airbnbs. The road upgrade for that project would slice through the ridge, visible from my top gazebo. Most neighbors groaned about traffic and noise, but Gideon, awaiting trial, publicly supported it, claiming it would raise tourism cachet and prove the association needed stronger leadership. Read, him. We suspected he'd already negotiated a finder's fee. Ember and I attended the county planning meeting, armed with wildlife surveys and a letter from the state fire marshal warning that steep roads plus rental turnover equals evacuation nightmares. The commissioners postponed their vote, requesting further study. The delay ignited Gideon's temper. From house arrest, he began emailing tirades accusing us of obstructionist environmental radicalism. At this point, even his former supporters hit unsubscribe. January snow muffled the world. I hiked up to the top gazebo one dawn, pulled my coat tight, and watched a sun pillar rise over frosted peaks, a vertical flame of light that looks like a physics glitch in the sky. Moments like that remind me why I built these structures. Not to exclude anyone, but to create a quiet perch above the churn. Ownership to me was responsibility, not gatekeeping. I snapped a photo, captioned it "worth protecting," and sent it to Ember as inspiration for her zoning rebuttal. February brought 2 converging storms, a literal blizzard, and Gideon's criminal preliminary hearing. Court moved forward despite snow. The judge, a stoic soul wearing thermal boots under his robe, listened to the DA outline evidence, forged signatures, self-written checks, falsified meeting minutes. Gideon's defense tried pinning everything on Marla. The overzealous secretary did it. But text messages showed him coaching her on phrases like standard operating procedure. After 2 days, the judge bound him over for trial and revoked bail when he caught Gideon emailing potential witnesses about improving their memory. The bailiff cuffed him on the spot. With Gideon temporarily off stage, the association breathed easier, but Camden Woods LLC had resurfaced, this time dangling promises of a community improvement grant if we endorsed their rezoning. They offered $20,000 toward road repair, pocket change compared to their projected profits. The neighborhood was split. Some folks, burned by Gideon's siphoning, saw any outside money as suspect. Others argued we could accept the cash and still negotiate building setbacks. We decided on a vote. Ember insisted on full transparency, mailed ballots, independent tally by 2 non-resident notaries, results posted online. Leading up to the vote, I hosted open house evenings at each gazebo. People came, drank coffee from thermoses, and walked the perimeter where the cabins would loom. One neighbor, retired firefighter Alonzo, pointed at a ravine. That draw funnels wind. Any fire starts up there, rental guests won't outrun it. His words stuck like burrs. Ballots returned and the count tilted 38-15 against supporting the rezoning. Camden Woods issued a press release calling us anti-growth extremists and threatening litigation for interference with lawful economic expectations. You could almost see Gideon's ghostwriter behind the bluster, but the county commissioners voted unanimously to deny the petition, citing community opposition and wildfire risk. Another win, though I stocked more coffee for future battles. Spring thaw revealed hidden damage from winter, hairline cracks in the foundation of my lowest gazebo. Nothing dangerous yet, but I wasn't leaving it to chance. I hired a structural engineer, paid for with Gatekeeper Series profits, and scheduled repairs. Several neighbors volunteered to help pour new footings, partly out of gratitude, partly for free carpentry lessons. Watching them work, I marveled at how an attempted expropriation had turned strangers into allies. Yet one thread remained dangling, my countersuit for trespass and vandalism. With Gideon jailed awaiting trial, his insurer, apparently he'd purchased a non-profit directors and officers policy, offered mediation. Carlin and I met their rep in a paneled office smelling of lemon polish. They proposed $10,000 and an apology letter for any misunderstanding. Carlin didn't bother translating my eye roll. He countered with full reimbursement for locks, camera upgrades, and lost vacation hours, plus a charitable donation matching the embezzled sum. The mediator's eyebrows arched like drawbridges. Talks recessed. 2 weeks later, the insurer upped the offer to $25,000 cash plus public acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Carlin held firm on the charity match, suggesting a regional wildfire prevention fund. The rep sighed. You people and your mountains. But we reached a deal. $25,000 to me, $25,000 to wildfire prevention. Gideon's name on a plaque that would hang in the lodge reading, Lessons Learned. Poetic justice sometimes prints in bronze. The association used my payout to repay homeowners the extra dues Gideon had levied, prorated by lot size. Checks went out with a note. Refunded thanks to community vigilance. Some folks framed theirs instead of cashing, souvenirs of collective power. As warmer winds swept through budding aspens, my trail teemed with curious walkers. I posted a sign at the first switchback. Enjoy the view, respect the space, pack out what you pack in. No keys required now, the locks stayed, but I kept them unlatched unless I planned to be away. Ownership reasserted as stewardship. One April afternoon, a familiar SUV crawled up my drive. Dex stepped out, hat in hand, guilt heavy as wet snow. Thought I'd bring these, he said, holding 3 manila envelopes, refund checks he'd just received. He looked smaller without Gideon's shadow. I never meant harm. I was, I guess, flattered to be treasurer. I offered him iced tea on the porch. He confessed he'd never balanced a ledger over $100 before Gideon tapped him. He said details bored other people. I believed him. Dex promised to testify truthfully at Gideon's trial and volunteered for lawn mowing duty until his conscience felt lighter. I accepted. Redemption, like foundations, requires digging and pouring and patience. That evening, while Dex pushed a mower along the lodge's hillside, Ember phoned. The district attorney had filed an amended information adding money laundering charges based on the audit's newest revelations. Trial was set for early June. She exhaled. It's almost over. I set my phone down, climbed the trail in gathering dusk, and reached the middle gazebo just as the horizon blushed rose gold. Below, Dex's mower headlights traced slow arcs like a penitent lantern. Above, the top gazebo glimmered, a lighthouse still. I remembered Gideon's text that started it all. Your gazebos are community assets now, and chuckled. In a twisted way, he got part of his wish. The structures had become communal symbols, but without surrendering a single plank of ownership. Kindness and legality had merged in cedar and cable rail. Still, the finish line lay one chapter ahead. A courtroom, a verdict, and repercussions measured not in dumbbell keys, but in years and restitution. I checked the solar lanterns, tightened a cable, and headed down. Sleep would come easily. Justice seldom runs on schedule, but it was finally picking up speed. June arrived smelling of warm pine and freshly split cedar, the scent of court season in mountain country. On the morning Gideon's trial opened, half the subdivision gathered in forest green Protect the Ridge shirts and caravanned the 50 miles to the county courthouse, a squad of neighbors turned citizen watchdogs. Inside, the prosecution unspooled a timeline. Gideon's rise to HOA president, soaring consulting bills, forged invoices, and the bolt cutter raid on my gazebos. Ember, calm as bedrock, translated bylaws for the jury. Dex, voice trembling, admitted he'd signed blank checks because Gideon told him to trust the process. I took the stand to narrate the security footage of Gideon prying a hinge off the middle gazebo. The metal shriek echoed through the hushed room. The defense painted it all as a misunderstood effort to give elderly residents safe access and blamed the missing money on clerical errors. Cross-examination shredded that fiction. A gleaming pickup titled solely to Gideon, bought 2 weeks after a road equipment loan, sat parked at his private lake cabin. No rental contract in sight. 5 days of evidence landed in the jury's hands. 2 hours later, they returned. Guilty on 6 counts from fraud to vandalism. Gideon sagged as though the dumbbell keys had fallen on his shoulders. Sentencing a month later felt solemn rather than triumphant. The judge ordered 5 years, parole possible after 3, plus restitution, $80,000 to the HOA, $10,000 to me, and 1,000 hours of wildfire mitigation labor. Marla, who signed the fake invoices, got probation and service hours. Nobody cheered. We simply exhaled. Civil fallout wrapped quickly. Gideon's first lawyers quit. Their replacements settled my countersuit, covering fees, donating $15,000 to the County Fire Resiliency Fund, and issuing a public apology. HOA insurance refilled the drained reserve, and Ember's committee carved out funds for an annual trade school scholarship. Fresh elections brought steadiness. Alonzo, a retired firefighter, became president. Dex, chasing redemption, joined the board to supervise mandatory audits. The developer who wanted rental cabins sued the county but folded when fire safety studies and neighbor opposition mounted. The land went into a conservation easement instead. Summer painted the ridge in wildflowers. We patched gazebo shingles, built stone retaining walls, and hung the once menacing dumbbell keys in the lodge as art pieces labeled "Heavy Lessons in Lighter Governance." Friday potlucks bloomed. A micro-library sprouted on a gazebo rail, and errands were paid with zucchini instead of fines. Dex, calloused and contrite, publicly apologized for enabling Gideon. 6 weeks later, a prison letter arrived from Gideon himself. He was clearing fuel breaks with a forestry crew, finally learning what communal labor feels like. A money order for his first restitution installment was enclosed. That fall, I started a fourth structure, a glass and cedar reading hut in a meadow, funded by sales of novelty oversized dumbbell keys. The county approved it without a single protest. Neighbors signed the notification list with smiling doodles. Ember stopped by, coffee steaming, and joked, "If the new board tries to seize this one, weld the key to a tractor tire." Winter returned gently. On New Year's Eve, we fed a bonfire scraps of Gideon's forged invoices and watched sparks drift toward ridgetop lanterns. Hiking home through fresh powder, I paused at the switchback, gazed up at the glowing gazebos, and realized boundaries defended with civility had become bridges. The lesson etched into cedar and cable rail is simple: protect what's yours, welcome others by choice, and trust that decent neighbors outnumber schemers when daylight filters through the pines. Friends, thank you. See you soon.